Elowen Monroe had always believed that justice was the highest calling. At 28, she was a brilliant criminal defense attorney at Morrison and Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. She specialized in defending innocent people who couldn't afford proper representation, often working pro bono cases that her senior partners considered beneath the firm's standards. "You're wasting your talent on these charity cases," Victoria Morrison, the firm's managing partner, would say with disdain. "Real lawyers focus on clients who can pay premium fees." Victoria was the daughter of the firm's founder and had built her reputation by taking on high-profile cases for wealthy criminals. She had a 90% success rate, not because she was a brilliant lawyer, but because she was willing to bribe judges, intimidate witnesses, and fabricate evidence. Elowen had no idea that her idealistic approach to law was making her a target. While she was fighting for justice, Victoria was building a criminal empire disguised as a law firm. Morrison and Associates was laundering money for organized crime, helping corrupt politicians escape prosecution, and covering up corporate crimes that hurt innocent people. "Your problem, Elowen," Victoria would say during partners' meetings, "is that you think the law is about right and wrong. It's about winning and losing. And winners don't worry about innocent people." What Elowen didn't know was that she had been unknowingly gathering evidence of the firm's crimes. Her pro bono cases often involved victims of the same criminals that Victoria was secretly defending. Elowen's detailed case files, witness testimonies, and legal research were creating a paper trail that could expose the entire corruption network. The setup began when Elowen took on the case of Maria Santos, a young mother whose husband had been killed by a drunk driver. The driver was Thomas Chen, the son of a powerful city councilman, and Victoria had been secretly paid to make the case disappear. "Drop the Santos case," Victoria ordered. "It's not worth the firm's time." "But she deserves justice," Elowen protested. "Her husband was killed by a drunk driver who fled the scene. The evidence is overwhelming." "Evidence can be complicated," Victoria said with a cold smile. "Sometimes what seems clear isn't as simple as it appears." Elowen refused to drop the case. She worked tirelessly, gathering witness statements, security footage, and forensic evidence that proved Thomas Chen's guilt beyond any doubt. But every piece of evidence she collected seemed to mysteriously disappear from the case files. "I don't understand," Elowen told her assistant, Jennifer Walsh. "I know I put that security footage in the file. Where could it have gone?" Jennifer, who was secretly working for Victoria, would shrug innocently. "Maybe you forgot to file it properly? You've been working so many hours lately." What Elowen didn't realize was that Jennifer had been stealing her evidence and reporting her every move to Victoria. While Elowen was fighting for justice, Victoria was systematically destroying the case from within. The trap was set when Victoria decided that Elowen had become too dangerous to the firm's criminal operations. She planted $50,000 in cash in Elowen's office safe, along with forged documents showing that Elowen had been embezzling money from client accounts. "I'm sorry, Elowen," said Detective Raymond Burke, entering her office with an arrest warrant. "But we have evidence that you've been stealing money from your client's settlement funds." Elowen was devastated. "This is impossible. I would never steal from my clients. Someone is framing me." "The evidence is overwhelming," Victoria said, appearing in the doorway with fake concern. "I'm shocked and disappointed. I trusted you completely." The planted evidence was perfect. Bank records showed money being transferred from client accounts to offshore accounts in Elowen's name. The forged documents bore her signature, and the cash in her safe had her fingerprints on it because Victoria had tricked her into handling it weeks earlier. "Maybe the stress of all those charity cases finally got to you," Victoria suggested to the police. "Pro bono work doesn't pay the bills." Perhaps she felt she deserved compensation for all her unpaid work. Elowen was arrested, disbarred, and sentenced to 5 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. Her legal career was destroyed, Her reputation was ruined, and her dreams of fighting for justice were shattered. "You should have listened to me," Victoria visited her in prison to gloat. "I told you that. Idealistic lawyers don't survive in the real world. Now you're exactly where naive people like you belong." The prison became Elowen's law school. She spent every day in the law library, studying not just criminal law, but constitutional law, judicial procedures, and legal ethics. She also began corresponding with other lawyers who had been framed by corrupt firms, building a network of allies who would help her when she was released. More importantly, Elowen began documenting everything she remembered about Morrison and associates' illegal activities. She wrote detailed reports about suspicious cases, questionable client payments, and evidence that had mysteriously disappeared. She was building a case that would eventually destroy the firm. "Knowledge is power," she would tell her cellmate, Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been wrongfully convicted of medical malpractice. "They think they broke me, but they actually gave me the time and motivation to become unstoppable." Elowen's breakthrough came when she met Judge Patricia Williams, who was visiting the prison as part of a criminal justice reform program. Judge Williams had been following Elowen's case and had always suspected that something wasn't right about her conviction. "Your case file doesn't add up," Judge Williams told her privately. "The evidence was too perfect, too convenient. Real embezzlement cases are usually messy and complicated." Judge Williams became Elowen's mentor and advocate. She helped Elowen appeal her conviction, and when new evidence emerged that proved the bank records had been falsified, Elowen was exonerated and released after serving 3 years. "Justice delayed is not justice denied," Judge Williams said as Elowen walked out of prison. "Sometimes it's just justice preparing for the perfect moment." But Elowen's real revenge was just beginning. Instead of trying to rebuild her career as a defense attorney, she decided to become a prosecutor. She enrolled in a special program for wrongfully convicted lawyers, earned her law degree back, and began working for the district attorney's office. "I want to prosecute the criminals who destroy innocent lives," she told the DA during her interview. "I know what it feels like to be on the other side of injustice." Elowen's prosecutorial career was meteoric. She specialized in corruption cases, white-collar crime, and legal malpractice. Her personal experience with being framed made her incredibly skilled at identifying planted evidence, forged documents, and witness intimidation. Within 5 years, she had successfully prosecuted dozens of corrupt lawyers, judges, and politicians. Her conviction rate was 98%, and she had earned a reputation as the most feared prosecutor in the city. "The corruption hunter," the Chicago Tribune called her. "The prosecutor who never loses a case because she's lived through every trick in the book." But Elowen's ultimate goal was to become a judge. She wanted the power to ensure that no innocent person would ever suffer the way she had. She studied judicial ethics, constitutional law, and courtroom procedure with the same intensity she had once devoted to defending innocent clients. When Judge Williams retired, she recommended Elowen as her replacement. The confirmation process was intense, but Elowen's record as a prosecutor was flawless, and her personal story of overcoming wrongful conviction actually strengthened her candidacy. "Sometimes the best judges are those who have experienced both sides of justice," the governor said during her confirmation ceremony. "Judge Monroe understands what it means to be wrongfully accused, and she'll never let that happen to anyone else." At age 35, Elowen became the youngest judge in the city's history. She was also the first judge to have been wrongfully convicted and later exonerated. Her courtroom became known as a place where justice was truly blind, where the wealthy and powerful received the same treatment as the poor and powerless. Meanwhile, Victoria's criminal empire was finally beginning to crumble. The FBI had been investigating Morrison and Associates for years, building a case based on evidence that Elowen had helped them gather. One by one, the firm's clients were being arrested, and their illegal activities were being exposed. Morrison and Associates under federal investigation, read the headline in the Chicago Sun-Times. Prestigious law firm accused of racketeering, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Victoria was desperate. The federal investigation was closing in, and she needed a friendly judge to dismiss the charges or declare a mistrial. She had been bribing judges for years, but the new federal judge assigned to the case was known for being incorruptible. "We need to get this case moved to a different court," Victoria told her defense attorney. "Find a judge who's reasonable, who understands that business sometimes operates in gray areas." The case was randomly reassigned to Cook County Criminal Court, where it would be heard by the newest judge on the bench. Victoria's lawyers were relieved. A young, inexperienced judge would be easier to manipulate than a seasoned federal judge. "This is perfect," Victoria's defense attorney told her. "Judge Monroe is new, young, and probably intimidated by high-profile cases. We can work with this." Victoria arrived at the courthouse in her most expensive suit, surrounded by her team of high-powered attorneys. She was confident that she could charm or intimidate the young judge into dismissing the charges. As she entered the courtroom, she noticed that it was packed with reporters, FBI agents, and victims of the crimes she was accused of committing. The atmosphere was tense, electric with anticipation. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Elowen Monroe presiding. Victoria's heart stopped as she watched the judge enter the courtroom. The woman in the black robes, walking with quiet dignity to the bench, was the same woman she had framed and sent to prison 7 years earlier. "Good morning," Judge Monroe said, her voice calm and professional. "We are here today for the arraignment of Victoria Morrison and Associates on charges of racketeering, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Victoria's face went white. She whispered urgently to her attorney, "We need to request a different judge. There's a conflict of interest." "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney stood up, "we respectfully request that this case be reassigned to a different court due to potential conflicts of interest." Judge Monroe looked directly at Victoria for the first time. "Mr. Patterson, are you suggesting that this court cannot be impartial in matters of criminal justice?" "Well, Your Honor, my client believes that there may be personal history that could influence the proceedings." "Personal history." Judge Monroe's voice was ice cold. "You mean the personal history of your client framing an innocent person, destroying their career, and sending them to prison for crimes they didn't commit?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Victoria realized that her worst nightmare was coming true. The woman she had tried to destroy was now holding her fate in her hands. "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney pleaded, "surely this creates a conflict that requires recusal." "On the contrary," Judge Monroe said, opening the case file. "My personal experience with corruption makes me uniquely qualified to recognize it when I see it." Motion denied. Victoria's trial became the legal event of the decade. Every day, the courtroom was packed with spectators watching as Judge Monroe presided over the systematic destruction of the criminal empire that had once destroyed her life. The evidence was overwhelming. FBI recordings of Victoria bribing judges, bank records, showing money laundering, witness testimony from victims who had been denied justice, and, most damning of all, the evidence that proved Victoria had framed Elowen. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said during closing arguments, "this case is about more than just corruption. It's about a system that was perverted to serve the wealthy and powerful while innocent people suffered." Victoria's defense team tried every trick in the book: character assassination, procedural challenges, witness intimidation. But Judge Monroe had seen it all before from the victim's perspective. She blocked every attempt at manipulation with the precision of someone who had experienced every form of legal abuse. Objection overruled, Judge Monroe said calmly as Victoria's attorney tried to introduce fabricated evidence. "The court is well aware of the tactics being employed by the defense, and they will not be tolerated." The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Victoria was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, and Morrison and Associates was shut down permanently. Justice has been served, Judge Monroe said as she read the sentence. The court hopes that this verdict sends a clear message that corruption will not be tolerated, regardless of wealth, power, or position. But Judge Monroe's greatest satisfaction came from what happened after the trial. The victims of Morrison and Associates' crimes finally received justice. The innocent people who had been wrongfully convicted were exonerated. The corrupt judges who had been taking bribes were removed from the bench. From victim to victor, Judge Monroe's journey from prison to presiding. Read the cover story in Legal Times, featuring Elowen in her judicial robes. Elowen used her platform as a judge to create programs that helped other wrongfully convicted individuals. She established legal aid clinics, mentored young lawyers from disadvantaged backgrounds, and advocated for criminal justice reform. They tried to bury me, Judge Monroe said during her keynote speech at the National Bar Association. But they didn't realize they were planting seeds. Every injustice I suffered became wisdom. Every day in prison became preparation for this moment. Victoria, now serving her sentence in federal prison, would watch Judge Monroe's speeches on the prison television, knowing that her attempt to destroy an innocent woman had backfired. Spectacularly, the woman she had called too honest and naive had become the most respected judge in the state. I destroyed my own life the moment I framed her, Victoria would tell her cellmate. I thought I was eliminating competition, but I was creating my own judge and jury. Judge Monroe's story became legendary in legal circles. She proved that integrity and justice would always triumph over corruption and greed. Her courtroom became a symbol of fair and impartial justice, where the truth mattered more than money or influence. The best revenge against corruption, Judge Monroe would tell her law clerks, is to become so incorruptible that your mere presence changes the entire system. At age 40, Judge Monroe was appointed to the state Supreme Court, making her the youngest justice in the court's history. She had transformed from a wrongfully convicted prisoner into one of the most powerful legal minds in the country. The woman who had once been called too naive for the real world had become the woman who redefined what the real world of justice should look like. Her story proved that sometimes the greatest justice comes from the deepest injustice, and that the people who try to destroy your dreams often end up creating your destiny.